We are going to be covering some topics. Okay. So this is the app division team. Okay. So today we are going to be covering Google Sign-In with Firebase Authentication. We are going to have login as well as logout. We're going to create a new activity, design the activities layout, also introduce you to some of the permissions in Android Studio. Then we are going to access the fonts gallery, of which we are going to allow the user to select an image. And then we're going to use the Glide module API to load the image onto our image view. So let's go ahead and start where we left from. Okay. Now, last week I had a few technical issues. It was basically because of my version of Android Studio. I was using beta version, so I had some problems with the Gradle file. Now everything is fine. These issues happen a lot if you're working on Android, so it's fine. You might face an issue similar to this, so don't worry. So last session, we basically introduced you to views, various views and view groups. And we also wrote some code in Java to move from the login activity to the main activity. However, this is a very terrible access control because the user is not giving any information. We're not even taking a password. So we need to implement some authentication, some access control, and we're going to be using Google's Firebase Authentication. Now, let's start. I hope everyone has Android Studio open. Now, first step I want you to take is open the tools and then go ahead and press on Firebase. Okay. Now click on the authentication drawer and then press on the first link, authenticate using Google Sign. Now you should have or your app should already be connected to Firebase, but it's fine. We can go ahead and do the same thing again. Make sure you already have an Android project in your Firebase account. And just wait for it until it's connecting. It's going to prompt you actually to connect. And now my project has been connected, and you should get this in your Android Studio. It should tell you that your Android Studio project is already connected. Second, we are going to add the Firebase Authentication SDK to the application. Now, this is basically going to add some libraries in the Gradle files. So go ahead and press and wait till the project syncs. Okay, now this process, I'm going to do it very slowly so that everyone can follow with me. I want you to go ahead and go to the Gradle button over here in the top right corner and press on it. Now, you should have a tasks directory. However, if you don't have, what you do is you just take a screenshot of this area and post it in the comment section, and we'll help you. You should find a button highlighted in blue. So I would tell you to click on it and then uncheck the options and then press apply and then press OK. And then you'll be able to see the tasks directory. So for me, I already have the task directory. So I'm going to open the Android directory and then click on the signing report. This is going to give us the SHA key. And it should give you the SHA key in the Run tab. So go ahead and copy the SHA key. And then go to your Firebase project. Go to the console. Select your project. And then open the project settings from the toolbar on the left. Open the project settings. And then navigate to the bottom where it says add fingerprint. Now over here, I want you to paste your SHA key and press on save. Now, once you have done that, press on the download button to download the Google Services JSON file. And you can go ahead and save it anywhere. Just make sure you're able to find it, because what we're going to do now is we're going to drag and drop it. You can also copy it, copy and paste it. However, change to the project view and then open the app directory. And you should be able to see a Google Services.json file already. However, we want the updated version, the one with our own SHA key. So go ahead and add it to the app directory. Make sure it's the app directory, not the src or the build. And then press refactor, and it's going to tell you that you're trying to overwrite it. And yes, we are trying to overwrite it. And that's all for adding or connecting basically your app to your Firebase project. Now what I'm going to do is go to the Google documentation. Google sign in with Firebase. Let's see what we get. So let me copy the link and paste it in the chat. Okay, reference. Okay. So over here, there is information about basically everything that you need to know about implementing Google sign-in. Now, of course, you have Facebook login, sign in with Apple, Twitter, GitHub. The options are unlimited. And this is actually one of the features that you can implement in your own project for the upcoming competition. You can maybe add multiple options, and it's always a good idea to have multiple options. I myself, if I download any application that doesn't have any other or multiple sign-in options, I would instantly uninstall the application. So it's always a good idea to have multiple sign-in options. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is copy all of these lines of code. It's from the second step. So go ahead and copy these implementations. These are libraries that you're going to need in order to implement it. Now I'm going to switch to Android, and then I'm going to go to Gradle scripts, and then go to the module. Make sure it's the module, not the project Gradle file. Now over here, just paste whatever you've copied, and then press sync now. Hopefully there isn't going to be any problem. Thank God, no problem at all. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add or create an instance of Firebase Authentication. Firebase Authentication, I'm going to call it mauth. Okay. Now I'm going to initialize or instantiate mauth by saying Firebase auth dot get instance dot get current user, or actually dot get instance alone. This is how you initialize. Now notice how I'm saying that I'm going to initialize mauth. And usually in Java, when you try to initialize any object instance, what you do is you create a new instance of that object, just like saying string x equals to new string. However, over here, I'm using a static method from the Firebase Authentication class. Now, why is that? That's very simple, because Firebase Authentication is a singleton class. It's a singleton design pattern. Now, don't worry, you don't need to know or understand what singleton is or even what design patterns are. However, I do encourage you to read more about it. But let's say you are trying to create a class called user. Class user. And this class has a string username and a Boolean value called is signed in. So once the user signs in, you can switch the Boolean variable to true. And let's also have a method called sign in. Of course, you have to call void. Now, this class has no problem. You can use it without any issues. However, let's say you create an instance of user over here. Let's say user equals to new user. And if you sign in this user, if you sign this user in the login activity, it's going to be all fine. And then navigate to the main activity. Now, the problem is if you go to the main activity and instantiate a new user instance, the new instance is not going to be signed in. Why? Because it's a different instance. It's not the same exact user that the user object that you're using here. So that's basics of object-oriented programming. That's because this user instance only belongs over here in the login activity. Now, how do you overcome this problem? Some of you might say, okay, well, better. I learned in object-oriented programming that you can just use the static keyword over here, and voila, problem solved. This is true. You can use this way, and if you initialize a new user class over here, and you try to access the isSignedIn method, it's going to be signed in. However, this is going to cause some problems. Why? Because if you're dealing with Android projects and you're initializing this class in multiple activities, then these activities are going to try to access your user class. And they might actually attempt to access this user class in the same time. This is a problem. Why? Because let's say you have a sign out method. Now imagine one activity tries to access the username while the other one tries to call the method function sign out at the same time. This is a problem because if the user is signed out, then you can't access all of these information. So how do you overcome this problem? By using a singleton design pattern. So a singleton design pattern, in a very basic sense, tries to order or queue all of the requests that are made by any thread or any activity, and then serves them one by one, first come, first serve. So this eliminates any problem if any activities are trying to access the same instance. And this method, getInstance, is always going to return a value. It's never gonna return null. So that's basic explanation of singleton class and how to use Firebase Authentication. Now, I'm also going to mention that we're going to use this variable to sign in. We're going to use the sign in with credential. So let's go back to the documentation and look at the next step. Now, over here, they're telling us to copy all of this code. I'm going to explain it very briefly. Okay, now over here, this is another design pattern. Don't worry, this is the second and only design pattern that I'm going to be explaining today. It's always a good idea to learn more about them. When you're developing a simple Android application, you might not want to use them, or actually, most probably you're not going to use them. However, as your project becomes more complicated and more complex, you're going to find that you need different solutions, and that's where design patterns kick in. Now, this is a builder design pattern. Let's say you have a class that has a certain functionality. However, for this functionality, there are different options that you want to include. Let's take this class as an example. Over here, we have multiple options, such as request ID token or request email. And if you add a dot and look at the recommendations, you're going to see that there are a lot more options. So this is called a builder design pattern. You can also research more about it. But basically, what this is doing is that it's creating the dialog. It's just creating the dialog that the user is going to receive. If you have tried to use Google Sign-In in any application, you must have come by a dialog with your own emails that you have frequently used to sign in. And if you have noticed that this dialog is similar across all of the applications. Now, why is that? It's because they're using the same library. They're using this same code to a certain extent, of course. And this code is actually helping us build this dialog, but still not showing it. It's not displaying the dialog. The displaying is going to come in the next part. Now, Android Studio is flashing in a red warning over here. Why? Because we need to create a local variable. However, we're going to need this variable in another method. So what we do is we make it a global variable. So I'm going to stanchion right over here. And here we go. Now, this is an error that you might get, and that's because Android Studio is failing to parse the values file. Don't worry about that. If you have this, there is a hack actually to solve it, but it's fine. You can run your application without any problems. Now, let's go ahead to the next method. Okay, this is the sign-in method. Okay, now we're getting another warning or an error. That's because we need to create a constant field. And we are just going to give it a random variable over here. And more on that in a few minutes. Now, this sign-in is the method that is going to basically display the dialog that we have created over here just now. So as you can see, we're creating an intent. So it's very similar to the way that we use to navigate from one activity to another. However, we're using the Google Sign-in client that we have initialized over here to get the sign-in intent. Now, when we launch this dialog, the user is going to have multiple options. Maybe he's going to click on one of the emails. Maybe he's going to press on cancel. There are a lot of scenarios that can go on. So we want him to click on an email, or maybe click cancel, and then navigate back to the main activity, or basically go back to the activity in the background, which is going to be our login activity. And then we want to perform our own logic to basically sign him in and then move to the next activity. So how do we get this result, whether the user pressed on an email or he pressed cancel? That's where the start activity for result comes in. When we were trying to navigate from one activity to another, we were using the start activity and passing an intent inside. However, over here, we're starting an activity for a result. What this is going to do is basically tell this activity that, okay, wait a minute, there is going to be a result coming in from this intent. And in order to get it, you just have to call onActivityResult method. OnActivityResult. And as you can see, there is a request code. This request code is the same code that we have passed over here. And you can give it any random number that you want. You can give it 1,000 or 10,000. It doesn't matter. As long as you are checking over here if the request code is equal to RC sign in, then you know that the intent that started this activity was this intent. Now, if you're going to have multiple sign-in options, that means that you're going to have multiple sign-in methods: sign in with Google, sign in with Twitter, and whatsoever. So you're gonna need to have different request codes: RC sign in Google, RC sign in Twitter, and in the onActivity result, to know which sign-in method the user has opted for, you can just check in for if the request code equals to RC sign in Google or RC sign in Twitter and whatsoever. So over here, they've already added the code for the onActivity result. So I'm going to just go ahead and paste it over here, and you should okay. You shouldn't get any errors except over here, because this is a log, and more about it in a second. And also over here. Okay, now we're saying if the request code is equal to the RC sign in, what we're going to do is initialize a task, and then we are going to call the getResult method on the task. And what this is doing is basically, it's basically signing in with the Google account. It's still not authenticate with our own Firebase project. It's just signing the user in his own Google sign-in account. So once he has been signed in, then we can go ahead and authenticate with our own Firebase authentication. And that's what this method is for. So hover on it and click on Create Firebase with Firebase Auth with Google. So just like I said, we're just creating a task, and then we are using this task to sign in to get the result, whether the account has been successfully signed in or not. And then we are going to authenticate with Firebase. So let's go ahead. We've already done this part, and this part we're going to do later. And then let's go ahead and just copy all of this thing. I can go ahead and remove my implementation. One more thing I forgot to mention is this log is basically used for you if you want to print out anything inside your debugger. So if you want to print out anything in the debugger, just add a logd and then add a tag as well as a message. So over here, there's just a tag and a message appended with the account.getID. Now, we don't need these logs actually over here. However, okay. So I told you before that we're going to use mauth to sign in with credentials, and over here we are doing it. However, we need to pass in a credential instance, and in order to create a credential instance, we need to use the ID token that we have received over here from the task.getResult. It gives us a Google sign-in account instance, and then we use the account instance to get the ID token, which we pass to the Firebase Auth with Google. So this is how you sign in with credentials. Now this block of code might seem a bit complicated. Let's go ahead and remove it and do it ourselves. So sign in with credentials. Sign in with credential returns a task. Now a task is asynchronous. What does that mean? If you call a task, then whatever is going to get called after it is going to be executed before the task is finished. Why is that? Because we are using Firebase Authentication. It's a cloud-based service. That means it's running on the internet. And services that run on the internet need time. They're not going to be instantaneous. They're not going to be real time as they claim it is. So it's going to take maybe a fraction of a second. However, that is actually more time or that time actually matters a lot if you're dealing with components in your program. Because if I try to run any kind of logic over here, this logic is not going to take a split of a second. It's going to be performed almost instantaneously after this method is called. So this method is going to return a task, which is going to take time. And also one more thing to note out is that the task might be successful or it might fail. Why is that? Because maybe maybe due to some error on the Firebase service, maybe the credentials weren't correct or whatever. A lot of things can go wrong. So a task can either return success or failure. Now, in order to wait or anticipate when we receive the result, we have to use an Uncomplete Listener. So what we're going to do, we're going to add an Uncomplete Listener on the task. So we're going to go ahead and add Uncomplete Listener. Just like an OnClick Listener, we added an OnClick Listener on a button to anticipate for a click event. Over here, we're adding an Uncomplete Listener to anticipate when is the task going to be ending, basically. When is the task going to finish? So we are going to pass in an Uncomplete Listener inside that we have to override. Now, Uncomplete, as I said, the task can be either successful or it might fail. So we're going to go ahead and say if task.is successful, then we are going to call a method update UI. If the task is not successful, we are also going to call the method update UI. However, we are going to pass null. And over here, we are going to pass a Firebase user instance. That way, we know that if the argument over here is null, that means that the sign-in attempt has failed. However, if the if the argument over here is not null, then we have a successful attempt, and we can go ahead and navigate to the main activity. So I'm going to say Firebase user equals to mauth dot get current user, and then pass in this user. Now this update UI method I still haven't created, but that's the cool thing about IntelliJ, is that you can just simply hover on it and then click on create method. Now, just like I said, if user is not equal to null, then let's just go ahead and go to the main activity. How do we do that? We just take the code over here and then just pass it over here. So if the attempt fails, what do? We just have to notify the user that the attempt has failed. So we just say sign in fail. So that's all that we need to basically log a user in our application. One thing we didn't do is call the sign-in method. Now, when do we want to sign in method? When do we want to call it? As I said, the sign-in method actually just launches the dialog, this dialog that we have built. So we want to call it as soon as the user presses the sign-in button. So let's go ahead and call it over here. Now, this logic seems to be fine or working as I think it should expect. However, what if a user has already signed in? If you have downloaded any application, you most probably have signed in it just one time. And no matter what you do, you close the application or even uninstall the application, the application is always going to be signed in, no matter what, if you try to open it. However, over here, we are only navigating the user to the main activity if the user signs in, if the user presses on the Google button and goes through the whole sign-in process. So in order to take care of that, what we're going to do is override the Onstart method. Now, you can also do this in the Uncomplete. However, you should follow the Google documentation. Now, over here, what you're going to do is call or create a Firebase user equals to, and we're going to use the mauth dot get current user. Okay, so basically we're going to do the same thing that we did here. If the user is not null, then move to the main activity. However, if the user is null, then we just we don't display anything because it might be a new user. So we just leave or we just shy away from displaying any tools. So we're going to copy this code, paste it here, and just say if user is not equal to null, then we're going to go to the next activity. Now, this should be all for the login activity. As I said, you might still have this error. However, it's completely fine. If I try to run, as you will see right now, it should be fine. Now, let's try to run the application. If you clicked on the signing report, then you have to change back to application in order to run the application. So let's see. Let's hope that this application runs fine. Okay, now we have the login activity. And let me just confirm that the app is running. Let me try to run again. Okay. Okay, so it seems like the app is running. Let's try to sign in with Google. I pressed on sign in. Hello, new user. Now notice, it's taken a bit of time, but it's going to launch the main activity. And it's saying sign in failed. Let's look. What has gone wrong? I think that's because of the... I was running another application. Let's try again. Let's see if it fails. Okay, let's try to sign in with Google. Okay, now we receive the dialog. I'm gonna press the better password. And it's actually displaying that the Google sign-in failed. Let's see why is that. Let me check to see if there is any. Let me try to run again. Now, this problem, I think it might be due to the setting up Firebase, although I'm not really sure. Okay, let me try to go to Firebase. Okay, this is the problem. I have downloaded the wrong Google Services JSON file, and I still didn't add the SHA key. So I'm gonna run the signing report. So, okay, I'm gonna copy the signing report. Go ahead and add the fingerprint. It's good that we're actually having some errors. You learn mostly through errors, especially when you're working with Android. So it's a good opportunity to fix our mistakes. So I'm going to do basically the same process that we did. And I'm going to copy and paste this into the app directory, refactor, override. Okay, now it should be working properly. Let's try to run again. Hopefully this time we don't receive any mistakes, any failures. Okay, let's go ahead, sign in with Google. And it works. It works. So that's it for the login page. Now we have to do one more thing, logging out. So in order to do the logout, okay. So first of all, if you have seen the design of the application, there should be a logout button over here. And Ruishin, I think, already added the menu inside the menu directory. So you should have this menu file in your application. If you don't, go ahead and fetch it from the resources that we have provided for you. So we have added this menu item, but it's not displaying over here. For that, there are actually two ways. The way that is in the GitHub repository deals with it in Java. However, there is a simpler way that you can use, and I also use when I'm developing my applications, is to go in the main activities XML file and then add in the tag inside the material toolbar, add in the menu tag, and then add the menu file that you have added. And instantly you should see this button over here. So now we have this button. Okay, to repeat again, you go to the main activities XML file, go to the material toolbar, and then add the menu in the menu tag. Now go back to the main activity. So what do you have to do? We have to create a toolbar. Make sure it's a material toolbar, not a toolbar, otherwise you're going to get an error. Toolbar. Okay. And also, since we're going to sign out, we are going to use the Firebase Authentication. So I'm going to create an mauth instance. And just like I said before, since this is a singleton design pattern, if we call mauth.getInstance over here, which I'm going to do right now, equals to Firebase auth.getInstance, it's going to retrieve the same instance that is already signed in. So now what we have to do is just find the toolbar, find view by ID. I'm repeating the same steps that we did for the button in the login page. I forgot the tag. Okay, it's main activity material toolbar. So go ahead, main activity material toolbar. Now, okay, for the button, we were just finding the button and then adding a set on click listener, and then voila, everything works fine. However, we are using a toolbar, and we want to access a button inside of the toolbar. Now, one thing to note about menu files is that all the items over here are indexed. So think of it as an array. Think of this as an array. If you have multiple items over here, the first one is going to be indexed at 0. So this is basically how you're going to access them. You're going to get index 0 because we only have one item, so we are going to use get index 0. So since we already assigned this menu to the toolbar, so we can just simply say mToolbar dot get menu method, and then get item at index 0. And then now you have the item. Now what you can do is just simply set on menu item click listener. So it's just like the set on click listener. However, this is set on menu item click listener. So you're going to go ahead and add set menu item click listener. Give a semicolon and just make sure you return true. Okay, so upon clicking the menu item, what do you want to do? You just simply want to navigate back to the main activity and also sign the user out. So in order to do that, you just create a Firebase user equals to mauth.getUser, and you just call user.sign. Actually, the user doesn't have the sign out method. You just say if user is not equal to null, mauth.sign out. Very simple. That's what I completely love about Firebase Authentication. It's very, very simple. So once the user signs out, what you need to do is create an intent, new intent. We want to use main activity.this for the context, and then login activity.class, and then start activity for intent. Now, does anyone see a problem with this? Does anyone see a problem with this code? Any issues, any problems? This might be a bit tricky, actually. Is there any problem with the logic? So we're just signing the user out and then going to the login activity. Now, if you haven't worked on Agile before, this might slip on you. Why? Because when you create a new intent and go to the next activity, if you just simply press on the back button, it's going to go back to the last activity that the user was at. So just simply saying or calling start activity for this intent is not going to be enough. It's not going to destroy the main activity. And you don't want that. Once the user is in the login activity, you shouldn't be able to go back to the main activity. So in order to do remove this problem, you just call intent.set flags, and the intent class has these flags. So just say flag, flag new task, and also intent dot flag clear top. So this is sufficient enough. I think that's all that you need for the logging out. Let's try and test it out. See if our logic isn't flawed. Okay. Activity is still building. Okay, so already our logic for signing the user in is working because we didn't have to press on the sign in button. So let's try to click on the logout and see what happens. And it navigates back to the login activity. So let's try to press back. And as you can see, it's not pressing back. But okay, this is happening because we didn't clear off the back stack, and it's going to another application actually. Let's try again. Let's try again. I'm going to prove to you that my code is working. Okay, sign in with Google. Now, if you noticed, it didn't actually ask me to, or it didn't display the dialog that it displayed in the first time. And that's why, that's because I already signed in. So the application already knows that I'm going to use this account. Now, you can also edit it so that every time it displays the dialog, because maybe the user wants to sign in with a different account. So let's try to log out, go back, and voila. As you can see, it just closes the application and goes to another application. So that's all for the Firebase authentication. Now I'm going to start quickly on the next part, which is creating the activity to add a new diary. Now we're not going to write the logic for adding the diary along with the data to the Firebase project. This is going to be in the next session. So let's go ahead and create a new activity, empty activity. Make sure you get a correct name. So activity, and I would recommend to go with a similar name to similar naming scheme as the one found as the one in the GitHub repository, so that if you by any chance want to copy code, you don't have any naming inconsistencies. But for me, I actually forgot the actual name, so I'm just going to give it a name, activity, or new diary activity. Oh, new diary activity. Okay, so make sure it's not a launcher activity, and just finish. Okay, so now we have created the new activity. Let's go and play with the XML file. For this part, I'm going to work on the XML file, and then the second presenter is going to be Maraj. He's going to work with you on the Java codes. So first thing first, let's change this to a relative layout. Let's experiment a bit more. with other view groups. Let's see how easy it is to work with the relative layout. Although I do recommend to work with constraint layouts, it's the most popular layout. However, every layout is useful in its own scenario. So go ahead, experiment. However, I would also suggest that always try to use a constraint layout. Okay, so if you try to run the, or if you look at the XML file for the new diary activity, you can find the XML file and switch on the design and see how it looks. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to code the entire layout file. So hang in tight, and if you are lost in the middle, just go to the cheat sheet. Everything is there. You can copy it with no problem. And if you are coding along, make sure that you add the correct IDs, the IDs that are matching here. It's just basically for your own reference. If you try to copy code, if you try to add any Java code from this cheat sheet, then it's not going to find this ID. So either copy the same exact ID or edit the Java code. So it's all up to you. First of all, let's go ahead with the material toolbar. Make sure the width is match parent, and then wrap content. How should we wrap content? Give it a background of cream. Now we want to add a navigation icon, so it's going to be IC arrow back. Menu, we also have to add a menu. I forgot to mention this. If you go to the, I don't have the file. One of the files over here is going to take you to the Google Doc, and it's going to contain. Mara, can you please send in the link?
Yes, guys, I sent the link of cheat sheet for today's session, which contains our cheat sheet from last session. So last session, we shared with you guys some of the icons, images, and menus that we use in our project. So please go in the cheat sheet that I sent today, find the previous last week cheat sheet and download them. However, for today's material, it's also provided in our cheat sheet. You need to download the menu that called Add Diary, underline menu, toolbar menu, as well as an icon that the name is IC arrow back, and you have to place it in drawable folder. Better if you like tell them exactly where is drawable and menu. That's will be fine.
Yes. Okay. Actually, just
And please, if you can increase your fonts, thank you.
okay. Okay. I'm gonna try to increase my font. Editor font and 17. Ooh. Okay. So I actually found the Google Doc file. Okay, resource downloads. If you open it, you're gonna find all the resources that you need. Make sure you download this menu file. Once you are done downloading, just basically copy and paste it over here inside your menu directory. After, okay. Now we're going to add the menu, and it's the add diary. Okay, now already this is looking more like the project in the GitHub repo. So next thing, we need an edit text for the title. So we're gonna add a text, input, edit text. Width match parent, we want it to be the size of the screen. And okay, this is how you basically position elements inside of a relative layout. It's very simple. If you want to position any view underneath another view, you just call it below. Layout below, and then you have to pass in the ID. So I'm going to give this an ID, toolbar, toolbar, toolbar. I'm going to give it a background of, it should be the same background as the toolbar as far as I remember. Let's also give it a hint. A hint is useful for the user just to understand basically what he is supposed to enter. Enter a title. However, the text is kind of grayish, so I'm gonna change the hint color, text color hint to brownish. And then I'm going to give it a padding just to make it look a bit more nice. And that's it for the title. Now let's go ahead and add another text input that is basically for the body of the diary. So create a text input, edit text, wrap content, which should match parent. Now we want this below the first text input, so I'm going to give this a edit text title ID. And then I'm going to say below edit text title. Now this is not supposed to have any background, so I'm going to say background at Android transparent. This is how you make a background transparent. Now you say it's already white, why do you need it to be transparent? Well, if you look closely, there is an underline which is very ugly, so I'm just trying to remove that. And also give it a padding of 10, and then let's give it a hint also. Write something double dot. Let's also change the hint color to brownish. Okay, now it's already looking a lot like what it's supposed to be. Now we need an image view. The way I remember it is an image view over here that basically covers the entire screen, and then a save diary button. And also there is another text view above the image view. So let's first add the button. So I'm going to add a material button, match parent, and the height graph content. Okay, the color is brownish. However, in the GitHub repo, it wasn't like this. So I'm going to give it a background tint of cream. And then, okay, in a constraint layout, to position an item in the bottom, what you do is just simply drag the constraint and put it to the bottom. However, over here, you can just simply say align parent button. Set it to true, and it just jumps right to the bottom. Let's give it a text, save diary, and let's give the text a color, brownish. The text is all caps, so let's fix that. Text all caps, set it to false. And if you can see, there's a small space in the bottom, so I'm going to remove that by adding inset bottom 0dp. If you're working with material buttons only, you're going to need to set that to remove any extra space. There is also an extra space in the top, so I'm going to remove it also. Inset top 0dp. Okay, now in the middle, there should be an image view, so let's add that. So I'm going to create an image view. Match parent, wrap content. Oh, let's give this also an ID. ID save. Let's go save button. And let's give this an ID of add diary image. Okay, so we want the image to be below this text input and above this save diary. We basically want it to extend all the way up from the text view to the button. So in order to do that, you just simply say below, and we didn't give this an ID, so I'm going to call it okay, it's a mistake. I'm going to add an ID tag. I'm going to call it body edit text. Always make sure your naming is your naming makes sense. It's going to help you a lot in your Android development. So I'm gonna pass in the body edit text, and as you can see, it jumped below. Now we want it to extend, basically extend from all the way from the top to the bottom. So we just say above, layout above the save button. So as you can see, it extended all the way from there. Now, if you add an image, it's going to be very ugly if there is no margins over here from the left and right. So I'm just going to add in margins 20 dp. Okay, and that's it for the image. But right now the image view is blank, so you can't really tell. Let me give it a background of cream. Now we can basically tell how the image view is going to look like. Of course, we're going to remove this, but this is just for us to visualize it in a sense. Okay, so we have covered how to basically add views on top and below each other. How about if you want to put text or views on top of each other? We want the text view. We want the text view here. If you remember, there was a text view for the user to enter the name of the location, and it was basically on top of the image, and it had a kind of a hue or a low alpha, so you can basically see through the background of the text view. So in order to do that, let's create a text input edit text, wrap content, wrap content. Actually, it should be match parent. To extend all the way. Okay, so we don't want it below the image, but we want it in the bottom of the image. So in order to do that, you just say align bottom. Instead of below, you just say align to the bottom. And then you pass in, sorry, excuse me. So you pass in the add diary image. Okay, one problem over here. You see, the edit text is actually extending beyond the image. So how do we fix that? So just like we aligned it to the bottom, we also want to align it to the left and to the right. So it basically sticks to the image. So we just say align end, add direct image. Align end basically means left, and align right, direct image, and voila. Okay. You should actually align it to the start, not the right. Okay, so that's basically, it seems like that's all. However, we still need to get a background. Don't forget about that. So it had a brownish background. So let's give it a background tint, brownish. Also, I remember. Okay, yeah, it was brownish, but it had a low alpha. You can basically see through it. So in order to do that, we basically have a gray 50 alpha. I think it's this color. Okay, so if you set the background to gray 50 alpha, it's basically gonna give it a very low alpha, alpha value, and alpha is just basically for visibility. And we're also giving it a tint so that the background has a tint. It has a low alpha, but it has a brownish tint. Lastly, it seems a bit too short, so let's go ahead and give it a padding of maybe 5. 5 seems fair enough. And also a hint, we need a hint. So let's add a hint. Maybe let's write add location. And the color of the hint is not very visible, so let's change that. Let's change that to white. And voila. Now, one thing we have forgot to do is actually in the image view, I'm gonna add one more thing, scale type. Okay, for scale type, you have multiple options. And when you're dealing with images, as you know, images have different sizes, different resolutions. So I do recommend you to explore about scaling the image. It's very interesting. For us, we need to use the fit XY image. Fit XY, basically, if you have a large image, an image that is larger than your image view, so basically it's going to shrink it and squeeze it until it fits in the image view. If you have a small image, it's going to stretch it until it fits the image view. So that's all. However, one more thing or two more things we need to do. So when you're dealing with user input, you must always make sure you add a limit. So in order to add a limit to any text input, you just add length or max length to, let's say, 50 characters. And over here, let's say max length is going to be its body. So let's give it 200. And also to indicate that this is actually a long, that the user can write more words, let's also give it lines 3. Basically extend it so that the user knows that you can add in a lot of text over here. And I guess that's basically it. However, one more thing. Now, if you try to run this after, of course, coding with Marad, it's going to be all fine. However, if you try to type something and it extends, the text input is going to extend, and as it extends, it's basically going to push the image view to become smaller and smaller, and you don't want that. So what you do is basically wrap this text view around the scroll view. So you create a scroll view, match parent, and then wrap content. Make sure it's wrap content. And then wrap this edit text. Now, all sorts of things are going to happen in your layout. Don't worry. You just need to give it an ID, scroll view. And the problem that just occurred is that this was already anchored below. And now the text input is no longer in the relative layout. It's no longer inside the relative layout. It's in another view group. So basically, it's inaccessible to this image view. So what you have to do is just use the scroll view instead of the text input edit text. Now, there is a problem. Okay, okay, this is the body edit text. Okay, so yeah, we also said that this edit text should be below the title. And since the scroll view didn't have the tag of the below tag, it basically didn't know where to put the scroll view, so it just flung up to the top. So that's all for the XML part. Now Mara is going to take you through the Java part. However, we're going to take a short 3 to 5 minute break. So try to take a rest, and we're going to come back soon. I hope you learned a lot today, but still stay tuned for the Java part. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Staying tuned right now. So we'll have a 3 minutes break, I think. It will be enough. And meanwhile, if you have question, please go ahead and ask us. And I'll be starting the session after 3 minutes.
تمام. سريع شوية. ما قدرت أسوي.
Battery, your mic is not muted. Is my screen visible? Can I have some feedback?
Yes, yes, it's visible.
Okay, so let's start. So far, what we learned from the first session was we learned all about XML files. We made our login activity and we designed our login XML file, which we used for the XML file of login activity. We used mostly constraint layout, and we learned how to use constraint layout. So today we explored on relative layout, and we learned that how to put different elements inside a parent layout or the group view that called relative layout. So basically the elements are relative to each other, and you can place them by below, above, align to bottom, align to parent, right to left, and start. So that was all the summary of very short summary of what we explored. And yeah, also we connected our app to Firebase. So now we are going to take further step and do actually, but until now we didn't do much of exploring on Android Studio coding in Java. Really, it was mostly on whatever we coded by now, especially today. Better try to implement whatever it was given in documentation from Firebase. So always the best sources to learn and follow are the documentations. So now we'll start our coding in making our diary to work. So this is the page that we created, and if you see that by clicking on this button that this floating button that we created in the first session, when you click on it, it will direct us to this diary activity that we created. So you should call it diary activity, however, better call something else, and you can call your activities as you feel that it fits. So what we're doing, today we try to actually access our users gallery. So, and that happens by clicking on this menu, and it gives us an option to choose from gallery, and it will prompt up the user this dialog that asks the user to grant us the permission to access the gallery. So however I want to actually work with this, I just close the app to open it again. So the first thing we would be doing to navigate from this button to open up our new activity. So in the main activity, we had our diary in the, okay. So when you want to navigate, always navigate from the project side, the hierarchy. So I want to actually do some coding in main activity. And one thing that someone asked, and I feel it might be most people's problem, that they ask of uh, how this content is, the XML content is connected to this Java activity. Okay, this is in this line of code, set content view, that we mentioned in the last two sessions also. If you don't see your XML file in your emulator, it might be because you don't have this line of code, or it is actually referring to a different layout. So if you hover on it and press on control, it will open the XML, the design that you did on layout folder. So here we have our button that we did in the second session, and now we want to navigate from this button to our new activity. So all you need to do, we need to find the view of this add diary of this button. So I'm going. I actually have it here, but to just code along with you guys. So you need to you need to find the view. How to find the view is by first of all creating a variable, and for creating the variable, the type of this material button here, it's actually called extended floating button. You always find your elements type from the tag itself, the last dot tag itself here. So in our case, it's extended floating button, and then we call it add diary button. So we learned about the set on click listener. So all we need to do here to put a set on click listener in for our add diary button, and then try to navigate with intent to the new class. So which earlier how Better did was creating intent equal to new intent, and then here we need a context, and one of the keyword to have a context based on last session you should remember is get application context, and the class that we want to actually navigate to, the name of the class that we want to navigate to. And then you need to use this start activity method and then pass that intent inside it. So however, the version I had, it was the shorter version, so it's good to know about the short versions as well. So now we should be able, if you followed, you should be able to navigate to add diary activity. So for the add diary activity, again, we need to access all of these elements that we created, that you created with Better. So we have the title, we have the note, we have the image, and we have the save button, and these two icons here. So one thing we have in toolbar, in our material toolbar, is to have a navigation icon that allow us to go back to the main activity through our app. So when you add the navigation icon, you can add the icon which is from drawable source, which is in the cheat sheet. You should download it and paste it in drawable, and you should be able to call this icon already. So now let's give a functionality to this navigation icon to go back to our main activity. But before that, obviously, we have to find our views. And how do we find our views? We practice a lot lately. So again, we need to create our variables along with their type. So we have the image, we have the material button, and we have 3 different edit text for the title of the diary, for the note, and for the location of the image that the user will attach. And we have our toolbar. So for finding the, for actually getting the reference and finding our views from the XML file, we need to find them by their ID. And how to do the reference is r.id. The ID that we gave here in our XML file here. That's why it really matters that you know what are the IDs here, and so you use them to make a reference in your Java coding, so you can give functionality to your views. So here, since I don't want to take much of time, I actually prepared the finding the views already. So one thing, before actually giving the functionality, going back, I want to mention this before I forget. So you see that when I actually clicked on the adding a diary, there is, I'm not sure if you guys see it clearly, but there is the text indicator, and the keyboard comes up that says that guides the user where to start in this activity. This is for user experience. So we want to see how exactly to do this. And that just happens by one line of code. So this is on actually title, is in our title. So the variable name for the title is diary title. So to do that, there is one line of code that you type your variable name that is input edit text that you say request focus, and by this line of code it does that functionality for you. Okay, now let's do the back. For that, when this icon exists in our toolbar, so we need to access through it from toolbar. So toolbar dot, there is a method called set navigation on click listener. So for the click listener, we learned about how are the listeners and the interfaces they work. So once you type new, it gives you the suggestion of this interface, and it will override the method inside it. So here, what we want to do, we want to go back to our activity. So I'll make, now I try to optimize the coding. Instead of creating intent in different line and then start the activity, I'll create my intent inside my start activity method. So I create my intent, new intent inside the start activity method. And the first argument that it wants is a context, and I'll use get application context for it. And we want to navigate back to main activity.class. And here also, we better just before me, he explained of going back whenever if let's say that we're in add directory activity, and then we go back and then we press on back, it should go out of the app here. But sometimes it happens that it brings you back to where you were, and that is not a nice user experience. And for here, you can use the flags. So you can use the same flags that he explained. So just to save us some time, we're not going to implement it, and we go on with our main functionality that we need to explore. The second functionality for us is to put a listener on this menu here. So for the main activity, we used the same concept to having an item, menu item in our toolbar to log out from activity. Here we want to actually access our gallery. So I'll use the same concept, toolbar dot get the menu, get the item, the first index of our item, and then set on menu click listener. New item menu click listener. So here the difference of these set on click listener, the set navigation on click listener, and the menu the menu set menu item click listener. So all of them, they have the same concept, but however you might see different argument inside that overridden method. So here it refers to a view because our toolbar is a view. Here it refers to menu item because we're trying to access a menu. So that menu is here. We're trying to access the menu and the item inside it. So that's why you see menu item here instead of view. So what we want to do here when user clicks. So what do you see here? When you click, you see a dialog kind of window pops up and asks you to choose from your gallery. Okay, first thing we need to build that. Let's create a method that we call it display builder. I'm gonna call it builder, and you see why I call it builder. And I'm gonna create this method. So for building something like this, we don't need to create XML files and then do some stuff in XML file. We can use a class that is already in Android Studio. So that class is alert dialog, and dot builder. This is also, if you notice, is similar to the Google sign-in that we did in login activity. If you navigate through, there was a builder, so it's kind of the same thing. We're not making any XML for that, for those dialog interfaces. We're using something that exists in Android Studio. So I'm just going to call it builder and then instantiate a new object. Okay, for this method, it's actually expecting us to pass a context, and I'm going to use this keyword for the context this time. So you see from here, what do you see? You see there is something very bold, and that is our title. So we make a title, set title, and I just choose image from. That's it. The second thing you see is an option, gallery. So if you notice, when you are using different apps, let's say Instagram, and you want to post, there are different options that is given to you, either gallery, camera, or from documents of your phone. Here we just going to implement gallery. However, for our competition, for our challenge, if you are going to add new functionality, so I recommend you to do camera. So to giving the options, to give the option to our builder, so we need to use set items. And this set items, you see that it is telling us I need a variable, and the type should be string, string of array. Okay, let's make our string of array, and I name it as options. And we know that in Java, how to make list. If you don't know, that's just how you do it. I hope that everyone listened to their FOP class properly. So here we need to add this option that we created. If you want to have the camera, so you add the camera option. So the second argument is an interface. So create new, and it's also the similar concept we had earlier. So you see that in Android Studio, in Android development, as long as like you keep going and then making new different functionality, you become more familiar and more comfortable with all these built-in methods and built-in interfaces, and all the names are so intuitive, and it's easy to understand and guess what they're doing. So once you create your new, it gives you the suggestion, and I picked the first one, and it's a dialog interface. Interface. This time, our argument, the override written, it accepts two arguments. One of them is the dialog, and one of them is a variable called which, that the type is an integer. Why do we need this? So first of all, we're setting items, and the items is a list. So you see here, if we're supposed to have the second option as camera, and we want to do separate things with our options, separate functionality with our options, so we have to somehow differentiate which was the option that was selected from the user, right? So how do we do that? Is by actually checking the index of this option that we are trying to give to the user. So for that, it's just a simple if statement, and then checking if this which index is equal to 0. That means user clicked on gallery, and user wants to pick from gallery. Or if you have the camera option, then you say which is equal to 1 this time. And if you have than 2, 3, so the best recommended code is to use switch statement. And again, if you still recall your FOP course. So however, here we're going to just use gallery, and we have one item. So here, once the user clicks, we are getting this dialog, which is asking for the permission. Now I'm going to implement this. That will take, it needs a lot of your attention, so please stay with me and listen carefully. So I want to check for something. So this alert dialog that you get, if whenever you're using a new app, it always comes one time and it asks you only one time to allow. So when you allow and go out of the app and come in again and try to access the gallery, it won't ask you again because you already allowed the permission. So for that, we need to go step by step. So how do we know the user already gave us the permission before? So we need to do some coding that checks beforehand if the permission was given or not. And only if it's not given, we ask the request and we pop up this dialog. So first step is to check if the storage permission is given. So I'm just naming the function that I'll be creating later. So if this is given, else something else. So I want to see if the storage permission is given or not. I'm just gonna put a not sign here. So this is the case that we don't have the permission to access the gallery, so we need to request. Let me create this method. Okay, so this method is actually it's going to return us a boolean. So that's why when I tried to auto-generate my method, it automatically added a boolean to be returned back from this method. So for now, I just keep it to return true, and I'll come back to it later. So here, if this method returns false, that means we need to ask for the permission. So I'm going to make another method and call it request storage permission, and then try to make this, and it's a void type method. But else, if we have actually the permission, we just want to redirect the user to gallery to pick an image. So I'll create a method pick from gallery. I'll create this method. Don't worry, I'll come back to it later to fill up all the codes in all these methods. So let's go on to actually checking our storage, because we said the first thing we want to see if the permission is given already or not. So first of all, why I keep using storage permission. The most important thing here is that whenever you want to access gallery or the document or any files from the user phone, that is actually storage of the user phone. So that's why we call it storage permission. So before actually checking the permission and requesting, we need to do one thing in our manifest file. So go to your project hierarchy and then go to Android manifest, and there is one line of code that is here that says uses permission and it follows a name, that this name it's defined already. This string is already defined in Android Studio for us to send requests to user, and manifest will handle that part to actually send that request. So that's why we need to keep this line of block of code in manifest. So for you can just go to the cheat sheet and then copy paste this line in your manifest file. Now go back to add diary. So first thing needs to be done is actually checking the permission. How to check the permission? Again, here we from now onwards, we all use whatever it's given provided to us by Android Studio, and we do not code everything in details that check the storage. So we are going to use classes and objects that it's provided to us by Android Studio already to make our work easier. So for checking the storage, there is a way to do it. From the context compact object dot. Once you press on that, the first recommended method is check self permission. So we're going to use this self check permission, and you see that it's asking for two arguments. One is the context, the second one is the string permission. So the context, we know that we can use these get application context and many keywords that we learned last week, right? The second argument is string permission. What is that string permission? Is exactly the same code that was in our manifest, and we used it here. However, we don't want to use this long where a well-defined string in our code. So we used manifest object here, and then dot permission dot write external storage. It's the first recommended one. And then that's it. Okay, so now the question is here, what this actually returns? What does this check self permission returns? Okay, let me just make equal it to a variable name as storage. Okay, and it gives us an error. Whenever you don't know that what is the returned type of variable, or what this method is going to return, or you're not sure of any type of the variable you're making, it's okay. You just make your variable and then you try to get the hint from the Android Studio. And here it says an integer. It says that our variable type is an integer. Okay, so now this returns an integer. What does this integer mean exactly? This integer, it's like the logic is that, let's say if it's 0, if we have integer 0, that means it failed, and if we have 1, that means it accepted. So this is a simple logic that everyone thinks of if they want to, let's say they want to make an API call or do any request that we hear a lot in computer science and in programming, that whenever there is a like API call or any request, you try to understand or try to identify if something was successful or not is being defined by Boolean or integer as 0 or 1. 0 as not successful and 1 as successful. So here this returns us an integer. So how do we exactly check whatever the integer it returns is where it's an OK result or it's a permission granted result? So for that, again, that variable is defined for us to use it in Android Studio, and we get use of it. So I make a variable, call it integer permission granted, let's say. And This time we get use of package manager in Android Studio dot permission granted. So this is, if you hover on it, you will see that there is, if you hover on it and press on control, you see that the result is 0. So actually here, the integer is actually 0. So that means when the permission is granted from user to us, that means it returns 0. However, if it's not, then it returns something else. There is also permission cancelled. So here all we need to do is to check if this storage is equal to this permission granted. However, I don't like this way of coding. What I'm gonna do, I'll just equal these two together. Now that I know what are the variables type, I'll get rid of this code. Okay, now that's it. We checked. These are the returns false or true. Okay, now let's see how to display this line, this block of code, and not block of code. This dialog that you see on the emulator here that asks the user allow or deny. So to send a request for this dialog, we need to actually get use of the class that we are using here in that we are extending. Our activity is always extending from app activity object in Android Studio. So from activity compact, there is a method called request permission. So we use this request permission. The first thing is asking for the variable, for the argument is activity. Okay, we know that for context, we can use this get context and get application context. But how about activity? So activity is actually a Java class, right? This is a public class. But however it extends, it inherits whatever the functionality this app compact activity has. So an activity is a Java class. How to refer to a Java class is always by this and this keyword. And then the second argument, okay, let me show you. The second argument that it accepts is string list. Okay, so we need whenever we wanted to actually here to check for the storage permission, we use this block of code, this line of code that manifest asks. So we want the same, right? So I'll just use the same. And then the last argument that it wants us to provide is integer request code, which you can give it any number, any integer, anything that you want. It doesn't matter. It's just for you to identify it. So however, for this request code, I'm gonna need it later. So I'm just gonna create the integer up here in my global variable. So private, let me just copy paste so I can, I'll be faster. Okay, so I'm gonna use this integer request storage request code, and it's 200. It can be any number that you want, doesn't matter. I'm gonna use the storage request code here, but we see we have actually an error here that tells us this this line should be, it's accepting us an array list or a list. So again, we just make a list. If you remember how I made the list for options, it's the same thing. So what this do now, I put this block of code into an element inside a list. I suggest you to actually copy this and define it in here and name the variable as storage permission, because we are going to use this refer back to this code over and over, and we don't want to make a list over and over again. So we just make it one time and we store it. Private string list and name it storage. Okay, now here I just call storage permission. Okay, now this block of code, this one will generate this this interface, and I'm gonna allow it here, and it will direct me to gallery. However, I don't have any picture here, so you won't see it. So the second thing we need to do actually, okay, now I just pressed on allow, but how does your application knows that user actually allowed our app to access the gallery? So by default, automatically, when you request this line of code, the result will come back in an activity, in a method that I'm going to override right now. So by typing on permission, on request permission, if you just type on request on R, this way it just prompts you the suggestion, and then you press on enter, and it will bring everything that you needed. So it looks scary. Don't worry, I'm gonna explain as much as I can to refer to tell you how this works. Okay, so the first argument here is request code. Okay, what is this request code? It's exactly the request code that we sent to our application. Okay, so whenever we are sending or communicating outside of our app, or even it can be inside the app, so whenever you're sending requests, the concept is just that to identify which call that you're making. So to identify those calling, those requests, we always need to send a request code, and it's always any integer. Better also explained about it, so we should by now be clear enough about it. So the first thing we need to check if this request code is the same as what we sent. So this on request permission result will return this request code, and it should be the same that the same integer that we mentioned. The second argument here is permission string list, which is the same permission. Here. Here it's the same permission string list that we set, and it will return back. And however, here we don't need to do anything with it. And lastly, we have our grant result. So this result is exactly the same result that if user allowed or not allowed, allowed or denied. So, and it's and the type is actually the type is integer list. Okay, so that means the result exists in this list here. So how do we know what's the result? We need to check again. Whenever it's checking, if statement always come handy. So the first thing we need to check if this grant result contains any element. So grant result dot length greater than 0. So we need to check if there is an element. When you say length, that means there should be an element already in the list. And the second thing is that the first index of this result should be equal to a code that we we want. So what is that code? We also again here use the prepared block of code by Android Studio. So you see that there is result OK, result cancelled, result first user. So for result OK, the value is -1. So that means user allowed us already. So here, now that we know that user allowed us, so we use this, we're going to direct the user to the same method that we're going to create. We're going to complete it later to pick from gallery. Else, if the permission is not granted, we can't direct the user to gallery. So we need to request the permission again. So I'm going to call the same request permission again. And that is all for all the part that we for the permission part. So now I already allowed the access, so it's directing me to the gallery. So if you're like me and you don't have an image, just go to Chrome of your emulator, or if you're using your phone, just if you're using your phone, obviously you have image, but if you are using emulator, you might not have an image. So I'm going to download an image from just internet randomly, and I'll download it and I'll come back to the activity. So the next thing we will do here is to pick this image and then display it here. So now our focus will be to getting this image. I hope that everyone is still following me. So now our pick from gallery. So this time, if you saw that we navigated to main gallery, any navigation between activities is being done by intent, right? Here, the navigation is outside of our app, but the concept is the same. So here we use intent again. So I create an intent. However, this intent is different from what we worked on till now. This intent, instead of adding the class name and the context, here we use intent.actionPick. If you want to know what is this, I don't have time to explain in deeply, but however, this is defined. It's a variable that is defined in the intent class. So if you hover on it and you click on control, it will give you that explanation, and you click on it and it gives you all the class. So the second thing is to tell this app what are the type of file that I'm expecting to receive. So for that, we need to tell our intended type is actually this block of code, and we want only image. So image, we don't want video, we don't want anything else except image. So we type image / followed by a star. That's how we give the type. And lastly, we need right now we made our intent. Now we need to start the we need to put the user out of the app, and just like the intent we were doing for starting the new activity, it's the similar way. However, it's we will use the same start activity for result that we used earlier with Better for navigating to in a login when you want to make when you want to actually log into activity and you choose your Google account. So here we use the same start activity for result, and this time we pass the intent again. It is asking us for a request code. So this time I'll be using this request code. Again, I'll make it globally because I'm going to use it later. And the name is image pick gallery code, and the number is 400. Again, you can use any number. Where was I? Okay, here. So Now I'm going to use the code that I created. So now it's done. This will will return the user, will direct the user out of our app to the gallery. But however, we want to actually return back the user along with the image that was selected. So for that, the concept again is the same as on request result. For that, we need to override a method from the class that we're inheriting, and that called on activity result. We worked on this also earlier on the login. If you guys recall, this is the second time, and it's really a good practice that everything is being repeated. And believe me, from after our sessions are done, basically whatever functionality you're going to add, it won't be out of this. It will, like, there might be some challenges in OOP, but a lot of context will be like similar things. So if you learn this, then that's over for you in Android development. Okay, so on activity result. First of all, again, we need to check this request code is the same as what we sent. The code that we sent, the name was image pick gallery code. And the second thing that we need to check, if this result code here, again similar to our permission that had the result grant, but however that was a list, here is just one integer. Okay, and we wanted to check if this is a okay result. And what we do, we use result code to result okay. One thing to here mention on line 101 that I actually was talking about the permission, to check if the permission was granted or not. So earlier I checked it from package manager permission granted. It's actually better to use the same here because the permission codes are different from the result okay, canceled, and those integers. So it might actually give you an error. So I just noticed it right now. So the same from our check storage permission, we use the package manager to check on the code if the integer code is the same. So here just that was my bad, just change it to package manager permission granted. Okay, however, for result okay, here on activity result, we will use actually this result okay, and the value is -1. We just saw it together. So now that our codes, everything is ready, we need to get our data, the image. Okay, this data has our image, and the type is intent type. So there might be some cases like now, if I go to the gallery but I don't pick anything. This image was from before, just ignore it. Let me just go back and show you guys again. So I'll go to the gallery, but I don't pick anything. So my program should be able to handle this part and not crash. So how to do that? To know that the user didn't select anything. That is also one line of condition to check if data is just not null. That's it. So now that it's not null, we want to store this image. How to store the selected image? I'm going to name it to a selected image and equal it to data.getData. So you see that, okay, here we want to know what is the variable type. Once you click on, it will show you that what is the variable type. The variable type is an URI type. So our selected image has URI type, and we want to display this URI type image into our image view that we created in our add diary into this. By the way, one thing to mention, so when you guys were actually, let me minimize this, when you guys created your XML file, the image and the edit text that contains the location of that image, they should be invisible because we don't want to show these views to user if there is no image selected yet. Okay, so initially make sure that in your XML file they're invisible. It's also in cheat sheet. If you guys didn't add it, so just copy it or just add it right now. It's visible to invisible. Okay, so now we want to load it in our diary image. So we already found a view and we want to set image. So how to set image? When you do set, when you type set on the image diary on image view, you get some suggestion, and the only suggestion here to add the image is bitmap. So this accepts a bitmap. A bitmap is a type of image, but however, our image is URI. It's not a bitmap, and we don't want to go through the converting the URI to another type of variable. That is so lengthy and it will take long time. And there is also another method called set image drawable, and it will pick image from your drawable. Drawable is here, so if you have an image you can pick it from here, but however the image that user selected it doesn't exist in our app, so we can't use image drawable as well. So how do we overcome this problem here? So to overcome that problem, we will using a third-party libraries or an API that help us to actually load a URI image into our image diary, and that is something called Glide. The documentation is also in the cheat sheet. You guys should be able to find it. So for now, you can just refer to my screen. So first thing we need to do, just like how we imported and gave the dependency for Firebase authentication, so we do the same here. There is one dependency that we have to include in our Gradle project, and that is this line of code. So copy, and then we need to paste it inside build.gradle module, the one that has the module. So you scroll down and then you paste it here. However, I have it already. I don't need to do it again. So you do it, and then after you make any changes in Gradle file, you have to sync it, and then you sync your project. Okay, back to our documentation. This Glide, I said before that it will help us to actually load our image into our image view. So however, there is one step to use Glide, and we have to create a class. Don't worry, it's not a lengthy code. It's so simple, and we'll do it together. So go back to your project hierarchy, click right on the com.example here, and create a class, just a class, not an activity, and then name it my Glide module. Here I'm just gonna call it my Glide module, and then refer back to our activity our documentation. It is asking us to import these 2 lines of code in our class. So that is done. The second thing it's asking us to do is to add a decorator, and the decorator are used by @. So Glide module, let's do that. Since we sync the project and we add the dependency, we should be able to find the this decorator. So, and it called Glide module. So we put it here, and lastly, what we need to do is extend our class with app Glide module. glide module. And then that's it. We don't need to do anything else and close it. However, because I have the same thing here, I'm just gonna delete this because if I try to run my app, it will give me error. So okay, now we use that glide to actually display the image. The first thing to do is using glide keyword followed by with method. This with method, it will ask us to provide a context first. The context, I'm going to put this. So glide is asking for context to just know what is the environment that we are trying to get use of this glide. Our environment is add diary class. So now we need to load our image. .load, and we just pass the selected image. Dot into. So now we want to say load this image where. That happens by into method. So into method, you see that it's telling us to give it image view. So we have our image view already, and that's it. And this is going to actually load your glide, the image. However, for better user experience, we are going to add two more methods here. One is transition. Okay, I'll come back to it again. Let me just check from here. Transform and transition. Okay, one is dot transition. Now it finds it. One is transition. So transition is that whenever the image is being loaded to the image view, it comes with a nice transition. You use this transition a lot in PowerPoint slides, right? So we're gonna use the same thing here, and I'll use with crossfade. And to use those transition, you have to just follow the suggestion that it gives you, like drawable transition option. The second method I will use is the transform. Transform, sometimes the image is too big and it won't fit exactly into our image view, and we kind of need to crop it. So here I use transform to crop it, and there is something called as center crop method already. It comes with glide module, all of these. Okay, now with all of this, the image is loaded. The last two lines of code and we're done for today. So if you still remember, I told you that the image view and the edit text for the location are invisible. And once the image is loaded, we want to display it and return and show it to user that it is displayed. So we need to now switch the view back to visible. How to do it is so we use the image view diary image dot set visibility, and if you press on caps and type visible, it gives you the integer code already that it accepts inside the method, and that is telling this image diary now become visible. The second is location, which we're going to use dot set visibility again to visible. And lastly, if you have noticed that when you select your image, this again the same concept that we did for title, and we put the text indicator comes that tells the user, notifies the user, hey user, you need to edit this here, and type your name of location. So how to do that? We already learned dialog dot request focus. It focuses the request on the edit text. So that is all for tonight's session. In the next session, we will use Firebase to save this diary in our application, and it will be displayed here. So let me come back to Teams and see if anyone has a question. I think everyone is sleeping. Okay, so thank you so much for bearing with us, following us up to this point, and always, if you have problem, please come back to me. You can private message me, ask me anything. I'll try my best to help you. And don't forget, please, this is like, I really appreciate if you guys do it, to fill up our feedback form. It's in the cheat sheet. Please go ahead and fill up our the feedback form so we can every time try to improve our presentations. Thank you so much for joining again, and don't forget to do your attendance so you get your certificate. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you for your time. Bye.